Hello, and welcome to today's Health IT Analytics webcast sponsored by Looker, Doctor on Demand, Making Data-Driven Decisions Securely. I'm Elizabeth Frost, Marketing Manager at Xtelligent Media and moderator of today's presentation. We will begin with a presentation by our speakers and conclude with a question and answer segment. Audience members can submit questions at any time throughout the webcast using the question tool at the left hand of their screen. For all technical matters or difficulties, click the Help icon at the top right-hand corner of the screen. A recording of the webcast will be made available following this presentation. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Looker. Looker is a complete data platform that offers data analytics and business insights to every department and easily integrates into applications to deliver data directly into the decision-making process. The company is powering data-driven cultures at more than 1,200 industry-leading and innovative companies. With that, I'd like to hand the floor over to Mary to begin today's presentation.
Thank you. So today, healthcare organizations have vast amounts of data that they're collecting and are facing the challenge of making that data accessible and actionable, however, need to maintain consistency while scaling. Additionally, there is added challenge of maintaining high standards for privacy and security required by HIPAA and other state and federal privacy laws. Doctor on Demand faced this challenge. How do they use their data to run and improve their operations while providing the highest level of privacy and security for patient data? Today, we're going to speak to you about the need for analytics in healthcare and key considerations when evaluating business intelligence solutions. Our focus today will be on data integrity, user empowerment, and security. My name is Mary Pearson, and I'm a data analyst at Looker. Before joining the team, I was a consultant managing implementations of BI solutions at hospital systems, and I'd also worked as a healthcare financial analyst. Overall, I have about 8 years of experience working with healthcare companies, mainly focused on the provider side. I'm joined by James Thompson, Vice President of Business Intelligence and Data Analytics at Doctor on Demand. Before joining Doctor on Demand, he was a data analyst with McKesson specializing in generic pharmaceuticals and has also worked as a technology and analytics consultant. First, a little overview on Looker. The company was founded in 2012 and we're headquartered in Santa Cruz, California. The company is rapidly expanding and we have offices in New York, Chicago, London, and Dublin, and shortly operations in Asia-Pac. We've established partnerships with key tech firms such as Google and Amazon and have an experienced team with many years in data analytics and business intelligence space. The company has over 1,200 customers spanning many industries. And here, this is just to show within healthcare specifically. We range from having providers, including acute and post-care, payers, pharmaceuticals, and health tech. So let's hop into a conversation about healthcare and some of the recent changes in the industry that are driving certain needs for data analytic tools. First, there was a movement of providers onto electronic health records, so patient data is stored in a warehouse that now can be queried. Also, there was a shift from fee-for-service payment to pay-for-performance. So now providers are needing to demonstrate and achieve certain quality metrics. And then also providers are now using other forms of technology such as wearables to capture additional data on patient, and this is even outside of the doctor's office or the provider setting. So what does this mean in the industry? With these changes, providers are capturing massive amounts of data on their patients. And as I mentioned, it's now being stored in a database that can be queried. Also, with those changing incentive models, there's a need for analytics to track and trend KPIs on certain patient populations. So this requires collaboration between companies such as providers and payers to share and exchange information. It could even be collaboration between analysts who have access to data in the back end and the clinicians who are treating patients and establishing protocols. And this is all to help improve patient experience and outcomes. So now that there is more of a focus on data-driven decisions within healthcare, we've seen two common reporting problems emerge. One issue, and we've seen this across industries, not only healthcare, is the data bottleneck. There's a person or a team, and they have access to the data, and they'll build out reports or dashboards. The problem is that a queue forms with requests, and this could take weeks or months to get answers, and this leaves teams understandably very frustrated. This may cause individuals to go back to maybe an old workbook or an incomplete data set, and then they might extrapolate from that to get the answers that they need to drive their business. This leads to the next issue, which is data chaos. Here we have individuals across the company that are working to solve the same problem or answer the same question, but in different workbooks causing a data fracture, and there's no single source of truth. So we might have this team meet for a strategy session, and we have 3 different answers for if inpatient volumes was up over the last quarter. This is a huge problem in healthcare specifically because either no one trusts the data, or it could lead to teams making ill-informed decisions. And this can cause adverse events or even impact patient health. Also, the issue is tools currently available to companies. There are legacy tools that provide that governance, however, extremely complex and not easy for people to use. Then there are workbook or desktop solutions that provide self-service but aid in that data fracture I was just talking about, as everyone is working on a different version of the workbook. So understandably, you want both that governance, but you also want the ease of use and self-service. You want individuals across the organization to ask questions of the data and get answers quickly. With Looker, we're really wanting to bridge that gap. But not only that, we want people to be able to act on the data and the insights that they're finding. Instead of siloing dashboards in a separate tool from other applications, such as your email, we want to incorporate these insights to everyday workflow. So an example could be, a claim looks off, and you want to be able to send an email directly to the claims manager with information about the claim ID that you're seeing in Looker. You can do that directly from the tool. So you may be asking, how is this possible? And it's because of our architecture. We're 100% in database, so we're keeping your data where it needs to be, and we're not extracting it out into a tool. You're generating queries in Looker using a point-and-click interface, but those are executed in your database. Also, this means your content and dashboards with volume, patient, financial information is always fresh with the most recent data in your underlying database. Also, knowing who has access to PHI is very important. We'll talk about this later, but Looker has a robust security and permissioning structure to help you manage who has access to this. Next, we have a semantic layer where you bake in your business logic. So, for example, it could be gross margin or inpatient visits. And this is creating consistency across the organization because everyone is working off of a set of metrics that is consistent. And then finally, we're a modern BI platform. Looker is a web-based application, and it can be deployed either on-premise, deployed securely in the cloud, or in some cases, we've had healthcare organizations do a hybrid model. So that's a high-level overview of Looker and our philosophy. I'm going to turn it over to James to give you a little more information about Doctor On Demand and their analytics and reporting needs.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, Doctor On Demand is a telemedicine service that allows users to get high-quality medical, psychological, and psychiatric care through a smartphone, tablet, or computer. Our service is available nationwide. We operate in a nimble, high-tech environment but have many of the same analytics challenges as any healthcare enterprise. We've been using Looker as our primary analytics solution almost from the beginning. So we pride ourselves on putting the patient first, and this has 3 primary pillars: the best patient experience through our product, the highest clinical quality, and the strongest brand. As far as the best patient experience, we have an average 4-minute wait time, and we're able to treat 90% of the conditions most commonly seen in an ER. As far as the highest clinical quality, our users give our service 4.8 out of 5 stars. We have doctors that are fully employed by Doctor On Demand, and our doctors have an average of 15 years of experience. And as far as the strongest consumer brand, we have 10 billion consumer impressions annually. So how does Doctor On Demand use Looker? Well, we have a number of management and team dashboards that team members check each morning to get updates on key metrics like visit volume. We also use Looker to send scheduled reports via email to push team-specific data to key users. And we use Looker extensively for ad hoc self-service analyses and data discovery, allowing everyone in the company to pull their own data. Now, in any organization, you have a core group of data enthusiasts or power users who will adopt whatever tools you give them. And you'll also have a group that's intimidated by the tools and will need more help and support in getting started. Our approach is to focus on the power users and the power users in turn train and support the people on their teams. So Doctor on Demand adopted Looker as our first BI platform, so there's no story there of before and after Looker. But I personally have had a life before and after Looker, and it's been pretty interesting. I hadn't used Looker prior to coming on board Doctor on Demand. And one of the first questions asked after the dust had settled was, so what do you think? Should we keep Looker? Not because there was any dissatisfaction, but just wondering if I had a better solution in my hip pocket. And for our security team, it was more like, you're not doing anything to Looker, are you? Because they really love it. And the answer was, of course, we're keeping Looker. I wouldn't be talking here today. And I think it'll become clear through this discussion why I made that decision. So what challenges do we face with data? We have many of the same challenges as any business, and also some challenges that are unique to healthcare companies. Like all businesses, we want a single, consistent source of the truth. We want decision makers to have easy access to the data they need without having to learn about databases. And we don't want the analytics team to be a bottleneck or gatekeeper. But unlike, say, Macy's or Starbucks, as a healthcare company, we're governed by stringent industry-specific requirements around privacy and security. Not every BI tool on the market is available to us or appropriate for us. Now I'll hand it back to Mary to discuss data integrity.
Thanks, James. As he mentioned, we're going to speak about data integrity and the need for a core set of business logic that individuals across the organization can use, whether in different divisions or geographies. So as we mentioned earlier, Looker has a semantic layer where you build in this business logic. We internally call this LookML, or Looker modeling language. Ultimately, this is a semantic layer that helps Looker generate SQL queries on your behalf. So this saves your analysts time as they're not writing lengthy or complex queries, and it enables non-technical users as they don't need to know how to write SQL to use Looker or ask questions of the data. So a couple properties of the modeling layer. And this may be more focused towards technical teams, but we employ engineering best practices and believe in don't repeat yourself coding. You define a metric once, but it can be accessed across the organization, so it's reusable. This semantic layer is breaking down SQL into those bite-sized chunks that I was talking about, and it's easy to examine, digest, recombine. And this encourages collaboration and iteration across teams. However, we understand your business is going to change, and you might need to modify the definition for a KPI. In Looker, all you need to do is change the definition of that metric once, and it will update everywhere it's used to keep everyone on the same page. This compares to maybe an Excel workbook, and you would change a definition of, let's say, a hospital visit, and you need to find and update that metric everywhere in that Excel workbook. But also you need to find it in all other workbooks, which could be hundreds of Excel documents. So ultimately, changing it once is going to be a huge time saver for your team. And finally, Looker integrates seamlessly with GitHub, which is a version control tool. So this means each data analyst gets their own sandbox environment that they can try out new analyses, and they're not impacting everyone else until they want to. And then also changes to your data model can be audited, examined, and then rolled back if that's needed. So here I wanted to show an example of the semantic layer. In this example, we're defining gross margin here as just sale price less cost. Now, individuals across the organization would interact with the gross margin metric here in that point and click pane on the right, and you can sleep well knowing that everyone is on the same page and not using different definitions for gross margin. So I wanted to go back to our reporting problem that we talked about before of chaos, and I wanted to walk through a healthcare-related example and how Looker's semantic layer helps solve this problem. We had a very large payer organization that had been trying to serve data to key stakeholders. However, they were doing this through the creation of hundreds of data marts, which were feeding thousands of workbooks. And this caused that data fracture as some metrics were defined multiple ways in different data marts, as well as some data redundancy. Looker allowed the analyst team to set standard definitions for KPIs just in one location that team members across the organization could access. And also it created a central analytics hub. So everyone in the organization was just going to one location to find answers instead of searching through thousands of workbooks, which could be in many different files. And finally, I'm going to leave you with a quote from another customer, Sipley Business, about our governing layer. And Stuart speaks to that cost savings of having a semantic layer can have on your business. So here, anytime you touch the data, there's a cost, whether in time or resources, and Looker was helping them avoid that cost. With that, I'm going to pass it over to James to speak about Doctor On Demand's journey for data integrity.
Thank you. Yeah, so single source of the truth is almost a cliche. If you've been on the receiving end of any analytics marketing, you've heard the phrase. And if you're a data analyst who's used to working directly in SQL, it may make your hackles go up because you need the most granular and direct control of the data. And you don't want some BI solution to get in the way. So what does single source of the truth really mean from a practical perspective? And how can you achieve it without losing flexibility? A classic example of this problem is two analysts working independently on a problem and presenting their findings to the same decision maker. Unless the two analysts try very hard, and even if they try very hard, it's almost guaranteed they'll come up with different answers. And they may both be right, especially if it's a very complex problem. This can be very frustrating for people who have to make decisions based on this data. Well, how can this happen? Well, here's an example. A core metric at Doctor On Demand is, how many visits did we get yesterday? Well, what counts as a visit? Is it that a customer initiated a call? Is it that they spoke to a provider? Or is it they received billable care? And for a business that operates nationwide across multiple time zones, how do you define a day? Do we define it locally, based on a single standard time zone? And if a standard time zone, which one? So how does Looker help us keep common definitions without losing flexibility? Well, in several ways. One of the most powerful is the filter pane. Looker developers can enforce business rules here so that everyone uses the same filters when asking the same question. Whenever filters you're using, they're visible and obvious. So when trying to reconcile two query results, comparing the filter settings will probably explain the difference. For date filters, the Looker developer can establish default standards based on your business rules. The Looker developer also does all the work of managing the table relationships and so forth, all of the tedious database level work, so users don't have to worry about that. And lastly, Looker does not form a barrier to the underlying data. If an analyst or developer is authorized to directly access the underlying database, Looker is very helpful in writing and validating SQL queries. Looker works by writing SQL code against the database using rules spelled out by the developer. If an analyst can't accomplish a task entirely within Looker, they can start in Looker, extract the code, and as a last step, they could go back and update Looker so that their analysis can be run on a self-service basis if appropriate. So here's a real-life example of how Looker makes it simple for multiple users to collaborate and agree on a single answer. I was asked by the head of marketing to run an analysis showing call volume for payers and employers. She suggested the results be shared in a spreadsheet. So some of the results were a little unexpected, and she had asked some clarifying questions. Did I use the right criteria? If I changed the query in a particular way, what happened to the results? If the query had been directly against the database without using a tool like Looker, answering these questions might have been as much work as the original request and taken some time to produce. I'd used Looker for this analysis, and I had included a link to the Looker queries above each result set. So she watched over my shoulder as I clicked through to the query, and she could see in a non-technical format the data sources and filters that I had used. And I could change the query multiple times as we talked, and in the end we agreed the data was correct. Later, if she wanted to, she could open the exact query I had used to continue data exploring on her own. And this is a nice segue to the next topic. I'll hand it back to Mary to discuss user empowerment.
Thanks, James. So how do we empower anyone, whether technical or non-technical in the organization, to become data explorers? So what's really exciting is that a new workforce is emerging and they're hungry for, you're probably guessing it, data. This workforce doesn't just want end-of-the-month reports, and they don't want to look at static charts or graphs. They want to explore and interact more closely with the data. And the workforce has title like these. We want to empower all of these workers to ask new questions of their own, whether it's the CFO down to the DevOps engineer. And here we have an example of our ad hoc query or report generating environment that James was talking about. Individuals can select their key business metrics on the left-hand side in this pane, and then quickly add filters or pivots and visualize in the way that they want to see. And then from there, they can further interact with the data, whether adding it to a dashboard, they can send an email to a colleague, set up scheduling that they get it in an email every Monday morning, or even creating alerts looking for aberrations in the data. So if we go back to the bottleneck and how Looker is helping solve this issue, we had an example where a provider, they had clinicians and quality payment program managers that needed help tracking outcome measures across populations. And in this case, it was asthma and diabetes patients. They put in a request with central analyst team for reports. However, the analyst team already had a backlog of requests from other groups, and ultimately it took 2 to 3 months for the reports to be delivered to this team. Also, because the analysts are not trained clinicians, they were including or excluding certain key inputs in their queries, and they were including, for example, the wrong diagnosis code. In Looker, the central analyst team was able to expose the quality group's data out to them, but then allowed these non-technical users to ask net new questions or make adjustments to previously created reports on the fly. So in this example, our lead physician could update a report for a new time period, or maybe include or exclude certain diagnoses in his analysis without having to go back to this central team. And this allowed that group to more quickly influence outcomes, and from there they introduced new protocols to help manage these patient populations. So we know an analyst's time is finite, but also businesses have infinite questions and they need answers quickly. So this quote by the BI lead at King is interesting because they're quantifying the time savings for that central analyst team, that by empowering those non-technical business users, they were able to generate their own content, which saved that team a year or more of time. And now I'll let James talk about their experience empowering their own business users at Doctor On Demand.
Thank you. Yeah, so the Looker interface is pretty easy to learn, and it makes it very easy for users to collaborate. I mentioned in my previous example that I had included links to my queries. This ability to save and share links in queries is one of the most powerful collaborative features of Looker. Any experienced user can create reports or dashboards in Looker, but you don't have to save something as a report to share it. Looker is browser-based, and as you select data and set filters, Looker compiles a link that stores all these settings. You can share this link and your colleagues can run exactly the query you would run. If a user finds one of their queries useful, they can save it as a report, or a look as it's called in Looker. They can save it in a shared area for everyone to use, or they can save it in their own private space. This private space is kind of a sandbox, a place where users can practice building things in Looker before they're ready to share them. Users can also create and share their own dashboards by compiling multiple related looks together. So here's a real-life example of how the self-service features of Looker help to solve a business problem. Last summer, Doctor On Demand made lab services available. In order for this launch to be a success, we had to make simultaneous changes to applications, databases, and business processes. It was critical that we monitor the rollout closely to make quick fixes to any unexpected problems that arose. Our lead developer worked with my team to make sure that the new data was loaded correctly to our database and visible in Looker. And she was able to create a comprehensive dashboard on her own, monitoring over 20 metrics like physician adoption, laboratory performance, and which tests were most in demand. She went on to produce 7 other dashboards for specific teams to use. With other dashboarding tools I've used, these kinds of dashboards would have taken months to complete. She was able to produce these on her own in about an hour per dashboard. This ability to quickly get the needed data in front of the right people played a crucial role in the success of the rollout of labs. So now we're going to talk about security.
All right, so we understand security is a very important factor, especially within healthcare, and you need flexibility to get sensitive data to the people that need it, but hide it from other team members that don't. So within Looker, you have different ways to permission. Looker can include column and data level access controls, so you can limit what individuals see what data. And this leads to the topic of PHI. Some individuals at the organization, like clinicians, may need to see certain PHI data. However, you need to tightly control that access. In Looker, you can obfuscate PHI data so 2 people can be looking at the exact same graphic, and one can see the underlying detail while the other, it's masked for them. Also, you can assign these permissions by certain groups or roles within the organization. So It might be for a particular department like the emergency department, or it could be for a marketing or analyst team. And Looker can even integrate with your own authentication or directory. So for example, you might use SAML or LDAP, and we can utilize the hierarchies that you've already built in there for access controls within Looker for that data. And permissioning can be done at 3 different levels. One for data access, as we were talking about before, who has access to what metrics. So if you need finance not to be able to see PHI, they wouldn't be able to see it. But also there's feature or what action an individual can take within Looker, whether they're able to create graphics, send emails, create a schedule, and then also content. So what dashboards or visualizations individuals or groups can see within Looker. You can divide these up into folders, so marketing would have access to their content, while the emergency department would have access in another folder. So with that, I'll pass it over to James to talk about their experience with security in Looker.
Thank you. Yeah, security was a big factor in our decision to go with Looker. One of the key reasons was the flexible hosting options. You can let Looker manage it for you, or you can let Looker run it on your own servers. So we have a business associates agreement with Looker. Security is managed at the Looker rather than the database layer, and Looker makes it easy to manage role-based security. And security can be administered on multiple levels. So as far as hosting, you can choose to have Looker run on Looker's servers, and they can take care of the basic IT support, or you can choose to run Looker on your own servers. It was important to us that we have control of the servers running our Looker instance, and this option was a big part of our decision to adopt Looker. Whichever option you choose, Looker will be helpful in getting you set up and running. So regarding database security, if you intend to use a BI tool to provide a curated set of enterprise data and to limit access, there's a risk that some individuals may try to bypass the tool and get directly at the underlying data, including data they shouldn't see. Not necessarily out of some nefarious intention, but just as a shortcut to accomplish some task. Some users you wouldn't expect know just enough about databases to give it a shot. Relational database systems have all kinds of security settings that they can be a challenge to administer and monitor on a large scale. With Looker, you don't grant users any database permissions. One upside to this is that the Looker administrator can add new users without having to involve the database administrator. So there's less IT red tape to set up and maintain users. And all of the data access is managed within Looker. And what's more, all queries run in Looker are logged and can be reviewed by the security team. So Looker has an intuitive role-based security setup. Users can be assigned to groups based on what they should be able to see. For example, you may have a group for HR or for marketing. These groups can be assigned permissions for different kinds of objects within Looker. You can assign permissions for models, which are the containers for the data. You can assign permissions to spaces, which are containers for reports or dashboards. You can assign permissions to individual reports or dashboards. And you can assign permissions for specific fields. So here's another real-life example. The Doctor on Demand app has a feature that lets users upload documents to share with doctors. These could be photographs or forms, for example. Some Doctor on Demand staff needed to see information about these documents to see how the feature was being used and to make improvements. The problem is that some people incorporated their own names into the document titles. The Looker developers wrote a SQL script that would redact the field contents if they contained either the first or last name of the patient. And on a side note, this is an important security feature as well. You don't have to publish database data as is within Looker. Developers can modify the data that Looker displays, turning age into age tiers, for example, or selectively masking some results. So we presented this solution to the security officer, and he decided it wasn't enough. What if someone misspelled their own name or used a nickname? So even with the redaction, he wanted to limit this field only to people who need to see it. So we used field-level security. And that can be a headache in a lot of database products. A common solution is to create multiple versions of a report, one with and one without the field in question. In a self-service tool, what stops someone from creating their own report and bringing the field in? Fortunately, Looker has an easy solution. You can create and define user attributes. And in this case, we created an attribute defining who can see document titles. We were then able to make the document data set generally available, and if someone without authorization viewed any report with this field, the contents will be masked. And here's another example. we needed to create a set of dashboards for our clinical quality team. This would contain sensitive data and require strict access controls to a small group of people. To accomplish this, we created a separate space and a separate clinical quality model only accessible to this team. For people not on the team, space-level permissions would mean that they would see no evidence in Looker that these dashboards even existed. But what if someone on the team accidentally shared a link to a query based on the data to an unauthorized recipient? The model-level security blocks users from seeing the data, even if they have a link. And in closing, I just want to share a few thoughts for those listening who are considering adopting Looker. First and foremost, I would say to plan carefully around who will be using it and how they'll be using it. Ideally, you're creating a tool for everyone in the organization, not just a small group of data nerds like myself. As a data analyst, my instinct is to create a repository with all the data I could ever need. But as a non-technical user, this could be irritating, make it harder to find the most useful and relevant data elements. So plan, get user buy-in, and remember that it isn't that hard to add something later if it turns out you need it. So err on the side of tailoring your model to the group that's going to be using it. And remember, you can change a model or create a new model without too much work, so start small and build as needed. I'd also recommend that you think through how you'd plan to drive adoption, including how people will be trained. It doesn't matter how good the tool is if no one uses it. And lastly, don't be afraid to ask Looker for help. I'd be pretty desperate to ask Microsoft or SAP directly for help and expect a personalized response. My expectations would be pretty low. But it's surprisingly easy to get a hold of a real knowledgeable human being at Looker who can help you figure something out or share best practices.
Awesome, thanks, James. And with that, I'll leave you with some additional use cases that Looker is helping solve in the healthcare space. So a lot has been focused on quality measurement, but also we've worked with financial teams looking at supply chain and cost management, but then even with patient experience and survey data at hospitals or health tech to see how are they treating patients and just trying to improve those outcomes. So with that, we'll be taking some questions.
Thanks, Mary. Just to remind the audience, you can submit questions using the question tool to the left of your screen. We do have some great questions here already, so we're going to jump right in. The first question is going to be a two-prong question. First, does Doctor On Demand provide MedMal insurance for all of its providers? And must Doctor On Demand physicians be located or certified in the same states as the patients they are servicing?
Okay. Obviously, that's a question directed for me. Yeah, I'm not intimately familiar with all of the way that we offer insurance, but I'm almost certain that we do. I think we provide whatever is necessary for a medical practice to function for our doctors. And as far as the state licenses, yes, the physicians need to be licensed in the state in which they're taking calls.
Great. Our next question is, does Looker offer supply chain management and optimization tools with the ability to integrate data with procurement, demand forecasting, inventory, etc.?
Awesome. So yes, what we do is we will customize it for your supply chain management system. So we have quite a few companies across industries that are using it for that particular use case. So we would work with your team to set something up for having your custom metrics. But then in terms of an out-of-the-box solution, we don't have one that's specifically supply chain management for healthcare. We're really wanting to tailor it to you and your company and your needs and have your business logic built in.
Our next question is, who would you suggest to be the BI administrator? Should it be a central IT person or the analytics team?
I'll give my view. So I found it helpful to have my team be in charge of doing the administration for our Looker instance, because a lot of the design decisions you have to have an analytics mindset to make good decisions about what features to add or what data to add to Looker. And it also makes it more streamlined in terms of getting changes made.
Yeah, and from a Looker perspective, we've really seen it just depends on the company and how it's organized. So sometimes there is a central IT team that really owns that, and in some cases it might be the business intelligence team, but then analysts in different divisions, let's say finance or within marketing, actually own their part of that semantic layer or business logic because they're closer to the business. So they're the ones that are really understanding, you know, as James was talking about before, what constitutes a visit. Or, you know, for specific, if you're looking at patient populations, you know, what are certain diagnoses that should be included when we're looking at this patient population. So it really just depends. We've seen a lot of different, but it could either be that central IT team that owns it, or you could bring it closer to the business.
Can Looker interface with any database? Are there restrictions on the type of database or operating system that Looker can interact with?
Yeah, great question. So yes, Looker, we can, how we connect is just through a JDBC connection, and it would be any SQL database. So because we are writing SQL queries against that database, we would need some sort of SQL interface. But with that in mind, we have connected to, let's say, Hadoop. We would maybe connect to a Hive or a Presto if they're using that database store. So yes, it can be many different types of databases that we connect to.
Our next question is, how hard is it to learn Looker ML?
Well, as somebody who's relatively new to it, I can give you my perspective. When I first saw it, I thought, oh no, I have to learn a new programming language. But really, that's not the case. It's you can use blocks of code. You can reuse them. So if I needed to add a field using LookML, I would just find a block that does close to what I need, paste it in, and then edit it. It's really pretty intuitive, and you can always, using the change management tools, you can make sure you didn't mess something up too badly before you publish it. So you can always test that your LookML is working properly before you deploy it. Yes,
and along that line, with LookML, it's just an abstraction of SQL. So again, as we were talking about before, it's just breaking SQL down into those bite-sized chunks that then you can, you know, examine from there. So really, again, just an abstraction of SQL.
Great. Our next question is, does Looker have any products that a provider can use to derive quality metrics for value-based care initiatives?
Great question. So we have been working with providers on helping track those quality metrics. Again, not something specifically out of the box, just because we know that maybe the EHR system that you use could be different, or that the quality metrics that your team has decided to track, since there are many that you can choose from, may be different. So, but we do have experience with working with these teams. So we would work with, it could be the clinicians, but also the data analysts who know maybe Epic or Cerner, whatever system you're using, and we can help put together a dashboard that would track those quality metrics.
Great. And our final question for today is, how well does Looker perform as far as speed?
So
great question. Yeah. Yeah, you go ahead, James.
You go first. Okay, I'll go first. So our experience is it works very well, and it really, because it's writing SQL, it really depends on what the data platform is that it's sitting on top of. So the faster your database layer, the faster Looker will perform. But there are some tricks to accelerating Looker, I found. So if you have a very complex query, for example, that maybe runs a little bit slow, you can set up Looker so that it will automatically turn that into a table on a daily basis, so that it will sort of compress all of the data into a table and then perform the complex query results faster. I forget what the technical term is for that.
Yes. So yes, we have some abilities to, and as James mentioned, it really is linked heavily to the performance of your underlying database, since we are executing those queries there. But yes, we do have the ability to cache result sets or we could persist that result set back to the database, and we call those persistent derived tables. So there are always strategies that if we have multiple people asking the same question or going into the same dashboard, we have strategies that we can cache those or help improve performance in the interface.
Thanks, Mary. So that concludes today's healthitanalytics.com presentation. Special thanks to our speakers today, James and Mary, and to our audience, and finally our speaker, Looker. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye.